Man, I really don't know how to go into this. I guess you just begin. Um, Today is the 1 year anniversary of Mark Lanigan's death, and it feels a little macabre, but I'm going to do something. I don't know yet what it is. I'm going to talk. I'm going to try and talk, just sort of talk off the top of my head for an hour or so. Um, about my friend and specifically about my relationship with him, my experience of him. Um, I don't want to. I don't want to expose his secrets, but I want to talk about the effect that he had on my life and what the last year has been like to be grieving and mourning such a legendary figure, such a larger than life person, a once in a lifetime artist, a once in a lifetime friend. The Amongst his friends, I feel like Lanigan had a pretty erudite, articulate crew, and you'll find us all sort of stuttering and stammering um, to try to articulate what kind of person he was, what kind of artist he was, because he was everything. He was all of them, and he sort of exceeded any narrow word that we have to slot an intellect or a heart, a presence, a brain into one category or another. He was a poet. He was a memoirist. He was learning to be a fiction writer. He was a songwriter, one of the greatest voices of our time. His editor at Da Capo, Ben Schaefer, said, Frank Sinatra, Nina Simone, Mark Lanigan, and I agree with that. He was an interpreter of songs. He performed so many songs that I thought were his songs, and they absolutely were his songs with his performance of them. But they just happened to be written by other people. He was a collaborator, and he loved collaborating. He loved working with other people. He really seemed to be energized by connecting with other artists and the conflict that might arise there. So I guess let me formally open with an apology. I opened the iMovie app on my computer, and guess the last time that I used that was the last time that I recorded something about Lanigan, which was 364 days ago. And looking at it, I am similarly unkempt, and my room is still fucked up. And I feel like that Tascam 38 8-track machine has not moved an inch since the last video. I apologize that my room is a mess, that I'm a mess. I gave myself a haircut yesterday. I got some of them, but whatever, it is what it is. Fuck it. We're just gonna go for it. I sort of put a call out to folks on the internet, on Twitter and Facebook and Reddit, for questions about Lanigan, that maybe they wanted answered, that I can answer or try to answer or gesture at answering or just slip out of them. But I'm going to go through some of those. Chris said, I think he was planning on writing another book, a mixture of fact and fiction. Were you involved in this? Yeah, we had talked about, we made jokes the whole time that we were working on Sing Backwards and Weep that, that there would be no sequel. And because, we were clear that there was not going to be a sequel, that's all we joked about. And, it was, Sing Backwards and Weepier to Electric Boogaloo, and but he was adamant that this was it, sort of one and done. And but we're addicts. If we're anything, we're recidivists, and we go back on our word. And after the success of Sing Backwards and Weep, I was like, Mark, I know you said that that this was it for you, but let's talk. And we talked about autofiction, like the work of Charles Bukowski and Lucia Berlin, and a couple others, where it draws elements of autobiography and fiction. We talked about The Painted Bird by Jerzy Kaczynski, heartbreaking work of staggering genius by Dave Eggers. Sort of memoir plus, like that, where the writer is incorporating elements of fact and fiction to hopefully deliver a narrative that's truer than than a story that is just the facts. Mark was adamant about the timeline for Sing Backwards and Weep because of people in his life who he cared about, who he didn't want to hurt. He wanted to. Well, I'm going to say he wanted to tell his story. He didn't want to tell his story. We nagged him and pushed him and cajoled him and forced him to tell the story. But he chose a timeline that protected people around him that he felt would be hurt by him telling the true story of what happened sort of after that. And Courtney loved putting him in rehab, and him, really finally coming to terms with his addiction and making the decision to quit. It was sort of a natural bookend. I remember, talking, and some of these stories I've told before, but fuck it, I'm going to tell it again. We were talking in his backyard one day, and he said, well, I'm definitely not going to put this story in the book, but this is a good one. And he told me the story of Courtney putting him in rehab, and then him having this sort of like religious epiphany, just a lightning bolt from God that he knew that he was an addict, and he knew that he had to change, and just sort of like falling to his knees, and begging God to help him. And when he finished telling the story, I was like, Mark, are you kidding? That's a fucking brilliant story. It's not just going to be in the book. That's the ending of the book. That's how it ends right there, And he was like, yeah, I don't know about that. And I was like, it's so tremendous. Like, you just had that epiphany and then you stopped. And he was like, oh God, no, I ended up having to go back to that rehab so many times, that they kicked me out. And then, and then there was meth after that. But that's when I changed. That's when the change happened. I think that's when he saw himself, as he had that moment of recognition. And he definitely had other misadventures with other chemicals, and and he did use heroin again, but not the way that he had, where it just had carved the humanity out of him. There's that line in Bad Lieutenant by Zoe Lund, where she talks about we're vampires, that appetite pushes everything else out until we're just that need, just that craving. And I think that that first bout of rehab, that's where Mark recognized that that he had to turn and fight. He saw himself, and he couldn't unsee himself in that moment. So we had been working on another book, which I had pitched him a couple of different ideas of how to tell the next story, and he wanted to write a novel, and I was like, no, we love you for who you are and for all the things that you've done, the mistakes that you've made, the art that you've made, your humanity. And there's something about nonfiction. I mean, we want the true shit. We want the real. And we all loved, Mark's creative output. And but there's nothing like a memoir. We wanted the straight dope from him. And so I said, let's do. He was adamant, no more nonfiction, no more memoir. He wanted to write a novel. And I said, let's do. The book is called Methamphetamine Blues, and it's just structured as a love story to a drug, and that's the book. Those are the bookends, and and we'll structure it like Derek Cianfrance's brilliant movie Blue Valentine, where it's sort of told in reverse, and the last scene of the book is him using meth for the first time and being like, oh, this is really going to work out for me, which I think as addicts we've all made that mistake with different drugs. This is going to be the one that's going to work out, And so we went back and forth about that for a while, and then lost the thread somehow. And then we bickered about this for, a while, but then I came up with another idea of doing a book sort of like Jesus' Son, where he could change the names and identities and basically tell the truth, tell a true story, but present it as fiction. And that would provide sort of a layer of buffer for the other people around him in his life, to protect them, to shelter them. I do feel that it is the obligation of a memoirist to reveal their own secrets and to protect the secrets of others. So I said, oh, okay, the book will be called Mark Lanigan is Dead, and it'll be like Jesus' Son, or like The Painted Bird by Jerzy Kosinski. And it will be, and I think we came up with a fictional memoir is what it was going to be called. And yeah, the working title for that was Mark Lanigan is Dead, which he loved. And it feels awfully macabre now, but that device, I think, would have freed him up to tell a lot of the stories that he was reluctant to tell, because his life got, so ugly and so convoluted. But, we did make some progress on that, and then it sort of fell by the wayside. And then there was another piece of fiction that he was working on. It was about a catalytic converter thief living in Los Angeles. And, while we were working on this, somebody stole the catalytic converter off my car, and he immediately tweaked me about it on Twitter, and he was like, "Bro, I'm sorry, it was right there. I had to help myself," and that was promising. But I have to say, I don't think it was another Sing Backwards and Weep. I mean, there is something about fiction is made up. It's lies. Right? It's not real. Memoir is real, and Sing Backwards and Weep was totally real. And Mark Lanigan was the realest motherfucker you ever met. And his voice, his presence, his consciousness was, it was nonfiction. He walked right out of a film noir detective fiction, the cloud of smoke and then emerging from the shadows. That was absolutely Lanigan. And I think that he was perfectly suited to, the grittiness of the real. And I don't know. I wasn't particularly supportive of him writing a novel, because I felt like for his career it would be sort of starting over again from the bottom. Let me look at another question here. The what was my friend John? What was your favorite day / weekend / cup of coffee / conversation with him outside of his music? What made him special to you? Lanigan had had developed a palate for the dark, the depraved, the degenerate. So there were stories from my own life that I didn't feel comfortable sharing with other people. I had secrets that I told him and that I only told Mark. And when I take my dog to the dog park, sometimes, or if I'm taking her for a walk in the woods, I'll see her sort of like stop and smell something, and then she lies down on her back and she does this like scritching dance, in the leaves or in the grass, and with just this sort of ear to ear grin on her face, and just sort of like pure carnal delight. And what it means is that she's found something like fucking dead and rotting, and she's gonna roll in it, and she just has this like look of glee on her face. And whenever I told Lanigan a particularly fucked up, deranged story from my own life, his face just lit up. He would be sort of stone faced throughout the telling, and then at a certain point, his eyes would light up, and he would just cackle, and particularly when a story involved my humiliation, or me getting owned one way or another. I told him one of the first, or the first time that I met him at his house, I told him the story of getting shipwrecked and making the decision, walking forever in the hot sun and making the decision to drink my own urine, and then getting rescued 5 minutes later. And he like just took a drag off his cigarette, and then he breathed out, and he was like, "You drank your own piss?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he just hooted, and just like I'm sort of reaching for old-fashioned words for happiness to describe the purity, mirth, right? He was his chest filled with mirth. He was it just brought him, my suffering brought him so much happiness. So I have a lot of like happy moments with him. And another one was meeting Greg Dooley for the first time in Lanigan's backyard. And he was like, "Oh, Greg, this is Mishka." And Greg was like, "Oh, hey, hi. Yeah, nice to meet you." And it was clear that Lanigan had mentioned my name to him, and that that I wasn't sort of there on a day pass, that he had accepted me into his circle of friends and collaborators, and and that touched me, and it still touches me. I think part of my fascination with Lanigan, and one of the things that I deal with my own writing and with my therapist, is this desire to be cool. We all want to be cool. We all want very much to be cool. And Lanigan was the coolest motherfucker ever. And I definitely felt cooler in his presence. I feel cool for having known him and having worked with him. And he knew that. And I think he was very careful to always treat me as a peer or as an equal. If I sent him a song, he wouldn't just rip it up immediately. He would usually say something kind, and then he would say, "Do you want my criticism on this?" And then he would rip it up. And he sent me a song once, and I was like, "Do you want my?" And he said no. He was like, I'm grateful for your gifts, when it comes to like writing and editing the book, and when it comes to songs, I got this. He knew what he was doing, and he knew that he knew what he was doing. But there were a lot of like, I don't know, just funny moments with him. He was dark Mark. He was a very craggy dude, and there were times where it was clear that he was sort of up to his eyes in his own pain, and he was pretty mercurial. He could fly off the handle pretty easily, and it made it that much more rewarding to get a laugh out of him or a smile out of him. Oh, one thing I want to say, before I forget, there's a new book out about Lanigan that I looked at. I'm not going to read it, and it feels in poor form to sort of trash another writer without having read their work. But here's why I'm not going to read it. It's fucking overpriced. He's selling it for more than Sing Backwards and Weep, than Lanigan's own memoir. As far as writing resumes go, this guy is a sausage maker. If you look at the other books that he's read, it's all like the grunge years, or the Soundgarden, Off the Record, or whatever. He sort of clearly found his niche of, I don't know, packaging up the scraps. That's what it seems like. Don't get me wrong. Please Kill Me is an amazing book, and the sort of oral histories of punk rock and hardcore. I'm thinking of Steve Blush's book. There's some phenomenal writing there and phenomenal reporting. Nothing about this, I don't see any arrows in that direction. This doesn't seem to be a promising work. And one of the guys carefully released it the day before or the day of the anniversary of Lanigan's death, which is that he plans on sort of riding the wave of publicity, and hopefully sort of getting the book in front of the eyes of curious folks. And I feel like I'm doing something similar, but in my defense, I didn't plan on doing anything for the anniversary of Lanigan's passing. I just woke up this morning before my alarm went off. I was sad. I thought about my friend Roberto. I thought about Ben Schaefer. I thought about how a bunch of us were sort of grieving alone together today, and had a bunch of feelings today, and I was like, fuck it, I'm just going to sit down and talk it out. Also, this conversation doesn't cost $50. Like, come on. And then the other thing is, this guy who wrote this book, a guy whose name I'm not going to repeat, a book whose title I'm not going to repeat, he's publishing articles that he's written about the book on like kind of bullshit websites, and that's a real bad look. It just looks corny when we're all hucksters, we're all grifters, we're all trying to get people's attention and the hearts and the likes and get people's eyes on our work, but nothing about this project points to it having any kind of artistic merit. I know that a lot of Lanigan's oldest friends and closest friends spoke to this writer, and I cast no aspersions on them. It's our job just to mourn and grieve, and I think that's what they were doing. I don't know. Maybe the book's great. I'll never find out. Look at another question here. From Jake. Just heard today that he helped write Something in the Way by Nirvana. Is that true, and how did that come about? I'm not going to tackle this question, and here's why. I'm a Lanigan fan. I was a Nirvana fan when I was a kid, and I still rock out to it when it comes on the radio. But Lanigan is what I'm here for, not who he knows or who his friends were, or the media always wanted Lanigan's story to be about his friendship with Lane, his friendship with Kurt. Those were his real friends. Those were people he loved and artists he admired, and they were his buddies. And I think it's hard for us as normals to perceive Lane or Kurt as real people who had real friends. But Lanigan was adamant that he was going to succeed or fail on his own merits. Kurt invited him to do the MTV Unplugged show, and Lanigan declined. It was, for better and for worse, it was his way or the highway. So I'm not gonna go into that question. I don't think it's germane to our conversation of Lanigan as an artist and what he achieved as a musician, as a songwriter, as a writer, to have him be like a +1 for a more famous friend or more successful friend. I just want to talk about him in his own light and what he did, and also I want to talk about my relationship with him, my experience of they say don't tweet your heroes. And I did, and man, what a fucking ride it's been. Also, I don't blame people for their curiosity, but about his affiliations with Nirvana, I'm just not going to answer that stuff. Message from Chris. My question is, how did you get to know him when supposedly he could be a hard guy to approach? Was it as simple as you made it sound during your eulogy podcast when he passed, or was there more to it? I don't remember exactly what I said, but it was, I think, let me back up here. I'm constantly, I went to Columbia Graduate School in New York. I still have over $100,000 in student loans that I owe. I teach writing now, constantly in touch with students, talking about graduate school. Is it worth it? Is it not worth it? Is that money that's well spent? I don't know. I went to graduate school. I guess I made it as a writer, but I don't have a control group. I can't say what I would or would or wouldn't have done if I hadn't gone to Columbia. So I succeeded. I found some success as a writer. Also, I went to graduate school. I don't know how much those two are related. My connection with Lanigan came directly out of my writing. I wrote a piece called 1,500 Words That Won't Tell You What Bubblegum Sounds Like, and tweeted that to him. And I still feel like, I don't know, something was with me that day when I wrote it. I still feel really proud of that work. And it resonated with Mark. I think he'd read a lot of writing about his music, some of which he loved and some of which he hated. And he wasn't afraid to sort of spar with journalists. But I think my writing resonated with him, and that he felt like I'd gotten it right, enough that he was willing to give me his address so I could send him a copy of my memoir. And then I stalked him and sort of followed up with him about that. And finally he did, sort of sit down and read it. And it sounds like I'm tooting my own horn here, but this is honestly how I feel like it evolved, that the writing was good enough that he was open to being friends with me. It wasn't, I've talked to a lot of people who met him at shows and stuff. I actually never saw him perform live, which kills me. But I've talked to a lot of people who met him at shows, and he could alternately be really friendly, really outgoing, or really standoffish. But my connection with him was through writing, and I think that's how I made it through, how I reached out, how I got to him. Yeah. Lila says, "Hi, Lila, one of my ex students. Anything you can share about the writing process for Sing Backwards and Weep and how he felt about it after it was published?" Yeah, we, basically I nagged him to tell a story, to write enough that we could give to Ben Schaefer at Da Capo to sort of prove to him that Lanigan was willing to write a book. And then Ben went and got us as much money as he could, and and then I thought I was just getting Mark the deal. I didn't realize that I was going to be coming along for the ride. So I did the proposal. I made the proposal happen, and then when we got the deal, I was sort of like, "All right, man, you did it, awesome." And he was like, "No, are you fucking kidding me? No, you're coming along with me on this ride. You're doing this too." And immediately after we got the book deal, Anthony Bourdain passed, and I know Mark was devastated, and he went sort of right into the studio, as he was grieving, and I was on tour in the UK. I was going through my own shit. I'd just broken up with a girlfriend, and I was sort of like, how are we going to make this work? How's this going to happen? And I did not have a place, like a home residence for 5 months that year. And so I was just bouncing around, and he sent me like all this shit, and it wasn't bad. It was just like really disorganized and didn't adhere to the rules of linear storytelling. And I had been living out of this two-tone 1976 Chevy van, and I splurged and bought myself a hotel room for like 2 days, and went and just sat there and tried to like wade through all this shit that he was sending me. And I was really depressed and stressed about it because it took forever to get through that first 10 pages. Like, it took so much sort of restructuring, and this goes here and this goes there, and then you got to make the connective tissue between there. And I was like, if this is what the book is going to be like, this is going to be a nightmare. But Lanigan was so smart. I mean, he really was a genius, period. That, when I gave it back to him and I was like, it needs to unfold like this. We fought because we fought about everything, and then he got it. I mean, he was such a sharp guy. He has such intensity of focus, and he cared so much about art. He wanted it to be right. That was very important to him. That I think the first couple of rounds I sort of pulled my punches and didn't really go hard on the samples that he'd sent. And he called me out on it and was like, "Come on, bro. Like, I know this isn't perfect. You've got to really give it to me." And eventually I learned to. But yeah, so it was really scattered at first, and it took a lot of cutting and pasting and editing to sort of put it together. But then he just learned so fast that by the last couple of chapters, I was doing very minimal things to catching typos, grammatical errors, and suggestions. Can we reword this, or this is unclear, or maybe moving phrases around in sentences. That was a long, weird winter to be doing the book with him. He worked tremendously fast. I mean, he would just I knew that he wouldn't write the book without a contract. So we got him a contract, and then he was under contract, and he had to deliver it. And it's like they sent him the money, and then, you know, money gets spent, and then you have to do the fucking work. And so he just... Sometimes the fastest way to get through hell is just to go right through the center of it. And so he would just sort of sit down for like 12 hours and just go to war. And I would get a chapter and be like, fuck, I gotta get through this. And then I would stay up late and get through it. And the next morning there would be another one and another one and another one. And it was just relentless. Yeah, I mean, I mean, we turned that book in early, and I got a call from Ben Schaefer, and I was like, oh no, this can't be good, you know, and he was like, I don't know what to say. And I was like, I'm so sorry. And he was like, this book is like, it's done. It's ready to go. You know, he was like, I can't believe how clean this is, how ready it is. So that's, I don't know, that's the process. How did Lanigan feel about it after it published? Man, this is really hard, because I really promised him the moon when we were writing this book. You know, I was like, I know that I'm asking you to sort of like go back into the graveyard and like dig up all these bodies, and that it's going to suck and be really hard and really traumatic to sort of have frank conversations, you know, with these ghosts. But then the end result is, you know, that they're given a proper burial, and that, you know, when you inter them, that you're released and you're able to move on, you know. And I promised him that there would be catharsis, and that he would feel better, he would feel lighter, he would feel a release afterwards. And he fucking harangued me after the book published. He was like, bro, you said I would feel better, and I just feel worse. I was like, God damn it, Mark, you're killing me. However, I've spoken to a couple of other of his, you know, close friends, and they've assured me that he wouldn't admit to me that he had gotten any relief from having the book finished and having it done, and the, you know, the response that it had gotten. But to them, he was able to come clean and tell them that, yes, that he did get, you know, some relief from it. There was some catharsis, you know. The Colin Galitko, this one just popped up. The what's an album you'd recommend to a new listener? I think the best way, the fastest way into Lanigan's work is Bubblegum, or oh my God, why am I blanking on it? Blues Funeral. Those are two records that stand out to me. He covered a lot of ground as an artist. He covered a tremendous amount of ground. But those are, I would say that's the gateway drug to Mark Lanigan's music. Those will sort of grab you by the lapels and throw you on board the Lanigan train, from which you may never emerge. Couple more questions here. From Gregorio. Despite saying he never would, do you think Mark would have eventually written another book about the second part of his life? I don't know. I hope so. You know, when I first met up with him to talk about the book and to sort of take notes and stuff, I brought him some books. I brought him a book of poetry. I think it's called Crow with No Mouth by Ikkyu, 15th century Japanese warrior monk. And brought him that. I brought him Jesus' Son, which I think he'd already read. I think I brought him some other books. But writing woke something up in him. I mean, obviously he'd been writing, you know, since he was a young man, but he'd never like tried to write a long narrative like that. And I think that despite his protestations to the contrary, that eventually he did fall in love with writing, and to have this sort of new form of expression. I think most writers would say that if they could write music and write songs, they would do that instead, because I there is something magical and bewitching about a song. But Lanigan had written a million songs, and I think he really, the experience of writing Sing Backwards and Weep, it made him a writer. He stared so long and so hard at that blank page and at the words on the page that he became a writer in the process of writing that book. And I think he would have written a lot. I've sparred with some people in Lanigan groups who are sort of like, lamenting his death, and like, oh, it seems so unfair, there's so much unwritten. And conversely, man, look at his output. Like, at what point is enough? We got a tremendous amount of material from him. And yeah, I hate that there won't be any more new records, and that we won't see what his outcome or his output would have been as a writer, as a fiction writer, as a poet, as a painter. He sent me pictures of some of the paintings and charcoal drawings that he was doing, and they were phenomenal. But also, I think as human beings, as fans of art, we got to recognize that artists are people too, and we didn't come close to wringing his talent dry, but we got so much from him. He was such a gift, and he gave us so much for so long. It feels to me like the only thing that I can say, that we can say, is thank you. Thank you for thank you for him, and thank you for having him as long as we did. It was so weird getting the news that he had died, because I couldn't believe that he was still alive for all the shit that he'd lived through. And also that he had lived through all the shit that he had lived through. I felt like he was immortal, that he was just going to, that he would live forever. I don't know. Let me look at a couple more questions here. Colin said, are there any stories that never made it in the book that you could share with us? It's tricky because, there's a lot of stuff that passed between us. I know that people who are fans of Mark's didn't just love his work, they also loved him. They loved the man. And I'm a fan first. I got to be friends with him, and I got to work with him, and that was a great honor. But I feel like my heart is still with the fans, because that's how I came to it. So on the one hand, I want to tell everything, Mark sent me a picture of his cock ring. It's hilarious. We had fucking ridiculous conversations, he would just, my girlfriend at the time was like, would catch me giggling on the couch, texting back and forth with him. And she called him my other girlfriend. She called him Markina. Oh, are you talking to Markina? Cause he and I would just text back and forth and fucking crack each other up. And I would love to share that with people, because it brought me so much joy. And also, those were private conversations, and I want to there's like little drips and drops that I do want to share, that I need to share, but most of that I need to sort of protect his wishes of the stuff that he wanted in the book is in the book. the, there were definitely stories of sort of screaming trees, fighting, battling, that I pushed him to turn it down, to take it out. We sort of got the vibe of that band, the dynamic between between the four of them very quickly, and then some of it just felt like character assassination, and I was like, okay, we get it that you guys didn't get along, can we sort of like turn that down? And there were some tales of like rock and roll excess where he wasn't given to that, but there were a couple of things that he wanted to feather in, and I was like, Mark, tell me these stories by all means, like, tell somebody those stories, but that's those nights of carnal triumph, it's a story for telling your friends. It's not part of your legacy as an artist. I did push him to write about Kurt and to write about his relationship with Kurt. He didn't want to write one word about him. And I said, Mark, Kurt was your friend, and you loved him for real, and he loved you for real. And it would feel like something was missing if you didn't just talk about your friend, so just write about him as you would another friend, and know that Kurt loved you, and that he wanted the best for you, and that he would have had faith in you to represent him accurately, and that this isn't like necrophilia or grave digging or anything like, grave robbing, anything like that. Actually, when the book came out, Rolling Stone wanted to put him on the cover and publish a chapter in the magazine, which would have been fucking massive. And Lanigan said no, because the chapter that they wanted to publish was the chapter about Kurt. And was so mad at him for that, and so disappointed in him. And now I get it. Kurt was such a huge star that Lanigan was sensitive about that, and rightly so. And I, in hindsight, I think he made the right call not to let Rolling Stone publish that chapter, because the book rose on its own merits. It was good. He knew it was good. We knew it was good, and he didn't want to. He wanted to do the right thing in the right way, Gary said, do you think that Lanigan would have still looked to get back to his previous fairly heavy schedule of basically touring, finishing that tour and completing an album, getting back on the road again? He seemed to be either constantly recording or playing shows pre-COVID. Do you think this is what he would have gotten back to in the same way as before the pandemic, or would he have wanted to concentrate more on writing, either prose or poetry, or on his painting, as he seemed to have found a few alternative outlets for his art? Man, who's to say? The Lanigan was really like one of the most productive, one of the hardest working, people in rock and roll. And I was stunned with, in the span of time it took me to make one record, he would make 6. And that one record that I made would have so many few listeners. It seems like black magic that he was able to make so much stuff and have it be of such consistently high quality. And, to have it be, it was really like all over the map. Which is not to say that he was like some genre hopper, or that he didn't know who he was as an artist. He claimed a tremendous amount of terrain for himself as an artist, to say, yes, I do this too. This is also Mark Lanigan, he just did what he wanted. I think he found a new home in Ireland. I do like to think of him, sort of happily growing old there. And leaning more into writing and painting and stuff like that. But I guess let me say this, rather than say, I think he would have done this or I think he would have done that, I would say in his art, there were 1,000 Mark Lanigans, right? From Screaming Trees, his early solo stuff, his forays into electronic music, Bubblegum and Blues Funeral, the sort of albums that I love the most. I think when we think about Mark posthumously, let's welcome all of those Lanigans into our lives, into our heads. Let's think about him getting healthy and getting back out on the road and just like kicking out an album every 14 months, for another 10 years and just, being constantly on the road and like hitting it hard. And let's also think about him, quitting music and just becoming a painter. That's an interesting, that's an interesting Lanigan to explore. I don't want to say one way or another which way I would have, I would think it would have gone. I'm open to all of them. I miss all of them. Someone said, amongst his friends, any talk of a tribute show, book, or maybe an album covering his music. Also, any new release of music that fans can anticipate in the near future. I actually had a dream that I had a green 60s Jaguar with a matching headstock, and we were putting together a band, and it was like me and Alan and Shelly, and like we were putting together a band, and there was like some big show, and I was so like flattered and thrilled to have been included, and I didn't know the songs, and it was like the show was coming up in a couple of hours, and and they provided me with like the chord charts, but I don't read music, so I was like, this is fucking hopeless, but then I was like able to start figuring out, and I could figure out, okay, these are the chords, those are the chords, and then I was like looking at my guitar, and the neck was like warping or wilting, and the neck was broken, or there was no truss rod or something like that. But worse than that, it was like, fucking an ice cream cone on a hot summer day. And then I woke up and I was like, have you talked to your doctor about erectile dysfunction? Like, this isn't a fucking dream about your dead friend who you miss so much. This is a different, very specific anxiety that you need to deal with. I haven't been in touch with a lot of other people from Lanigan's camp. I've talked to Roberto and Joe Cardamone and Ben Schaefer and a couple other people here and there. But I'm sort of the literary guy, or was. So I don't know, what's coming up as far as any new music to be released or a tribute album or something like that. I think that would be super cool, though. There's another question about the new book, which I think I hopefully already adequately shit on. Talking about books, do you ever think about writing a book about Lanigan? Yes and no. I did, when I switched iPhones, I had a weird thought, and I actually paid for, this is an interesting story. When Lanigan and I were just starting to get to know each other, I think before we were even working on the book, he sent me a phone demo for Ketamine Blues, and it was so fucking awesome. It was, more than any nude I've ever received in my life, to get a demo from your favorite artist that he recorded on his phone, where you can hear like the traffic, and Mark was a shitty guitar player, and hear him like sort of stumbling through the guitar parts, and hear like his unmistakable voice, there just, it was phenomenal. And what he was saying when he sent me that demo was, I trust you. I trust you to not circulate this. So I played it for a couple of people, but I never shared it with a soul. I didn't send it to a single person. And then I changed phones and I paid for some app to like save the entire conversation. And I think it saved the texts, but it didn't save any of the pictures or the song, which is the song was what I wanted. And I was fucking devastated. But then in January I was out on tour and having a rough go of it, and I think I was like trying to find where I'd saved a set list or notes or something in my phone, and then I came upon the files, documents, whatever, fucking iCloud, I don't know. And there I clicked on something, and the first thing that I found was a voice message from him that I'd saved, and I don't remember what the context was, but it was something like, you gotta bleed for them. You gotta try to bleed for everyone. And I don't know if he was talking about songs or shows or listeners or readers or fans, but in that moment it felt like he was speaking directly to me about the hole that I was in, of like, why am I still doing these shows? What do these shows mean? Who are these people, these 6 people who come to one of my shows in fucking Nashville or whatever. And then I went back and I found the demo for Ketamine Blues, and it had been there the whole time, and it just felt like a weird, I don't know, a turn of the karmic wheel, that I had been, I'd been rewarded for not sharing that it resurfaced in my life, So it's a long way of saying, I don't know if I will ever write a book about Lanigan. If I ever write a book about Lanigan, it will be about my Mark Lanigan, my experience with him. It'll be about, because I don't want to. One of the things that Mark was so adamant about is that he was not going to fucking make a buck off his association with Lane or his association with Kurt or whatever. He wanted his work to stand on its own 2 feet. My writing stands on its own 2 feet. That was my connection to Mark. I don't feel, I want to share my experience of befriending him and working with him and collaborating with him, but I don't want to scrape that personal relationship for a couple of bucks, I think it's inevitable that I will write something, but I'm in no hurry to turn it out on the first anniversary of his death, and then chill for it. I think it'll be something that will take time, when it comes. Which direction do you think Mark would be going musically if he were around? You think he'd delve deeper into that melancholy goth territory he'd been in since Gargoyle? Yeah, I mean, Mark loved electronic music and goth rock for for lack of a better term. He had a story about, he had a car that Kurt had given him with a push button transmission, and there was I think it was a Joy Division tape cassette that had been in the stereo, and then somebody had spilled coffee on it or something, so that it was it had gotten stuck, so he was just listening to it over and over again, and Mark was too big for this car and he couldn't fit in it and couldn't see out the window and stuff. So thinking about that cassette tape, being distorted, sort of like Joy Division, just sort of circling over and over again. I love that, and I think that that's a good way of thinking about his music, or a lens through which to see his music. So I think that he would be doing more experimental electronic stuff. I know he loved collaborating with Alan Johannes. But also, we were hanging out in his garage once, and he was making fun of me for not knowing. Oh fuck! I'm gonna forget the guy's name again. Bobby Bland, for not knowing his music, and then we started talking about old soul music, and I looked at Mark and I was like, I'm kind of surprised that you never did like a soul album, with horns or something like that. And he nodded and he was like, eventually that's going to happen, that there will. He wanted to do the sort of like weirder, eclectic, electronic stuff that maybe alienated some people. And then I think once he had taken that as far as he could, then he would do a huge shift just to fuck with everybody and put out like a soul record. I like thinking about that too. Someone said, I hope that Black Phoebe LP, which was in the works, will be released at some point. From what I recall, there were vague indications that a not insignificant amount of recording had been done for it. I really loved that EP, and Shelley has a great voice for that sort of dark wave stuff. Yeah, I think there's a lot of stuff that's that was sort of halfway or in process. But the best answer I can give on that is I don't know. I don't know what's going on with that. I don't know what happened with that. I have some stuff that he sent me, but again, I'm not gonna put that out. I'm not gonna leak that. Here's another one that I'll answer here. I've always been curious about his mindset on faith. I've got a feeling he had no taste for organized religion, but that final scene in Sing Backwards and Weep, his saying he believes there's a God, and that he prayed sometimes, forgetting the name of the interview, but it's a fairly popular one, and I can find it again. The many references to spiritual imagery in his songs. Did you have any insight into that side of his life from the time you knew him? Yeah, Lanigan and I were arguing about sobriety once because I don't drink, but I've been honest about, being a vocal proponent of the restorative powers of mushrooms and LSD and DMT. I think the jury is out as far as ketamine and MDMA are concerned, but I asked him how he stayed sober, how he went to, how he was able to get to sleep at night. And he said that he prayed. I don't think that Lanigan prayed to a white male god with a long flowing beard on a celestial throne. I think he probably prayed to something broader, something more universal. One of the things that I loved about Lanegan was that he was a man's man. He was he was very masculine. He was a swaggering hard ass, and he was also he was a feminist. Let's use the F word. He believed in supporting the female musicians and writers and artists that he knew. And he treated women equally. That's what feminism is all about. It's equal treatment. I think, I keep coming back to this line, which is very sort of like, freshman college literature 101, of I am large, I contain multitudes. There was nobody who that is more accurate about when it comes to Lanigan. He was a million different people, and they were all Mark Lanigan. But he did very much, believe that women weren't given a fair shake, just in general, but specifically in the music industry and the entertainment industry. And in particular, he thought that Courtney had, had just been abused, for, and that it was ridiculous, This is from Alex. I was always curious about Lanigan's departure from Queens. He's touched on this in a few interviews, but his responses were always rather cryptic. He was originally kicked out of the band at the same time as Oliveri, but how did he end up back in the band a year later to tour for their '05 album, Lullabies to Paralyze? And how did he end up leaving the band again later that year? I don't have any inside scoop there. Bands are unstable molecules. I think that a band's natural tendency is to fall apart or to fly apart, and that anything can touch that off. And I guess let me answer your question with a question and say, knowing what you know about Lanigan, can you think about anything, or can you postulate any things that might make people want him to not be in a band with them? At his memorial, Josh told a great story about Lanigan getting into a fist fight with one of the guys from Trail of the Dead and kicking his ass all the way up and down the alley. That kind of shit makes for great stories, and if you're on the road with people, that can get pretty tiresome pretty quickly. Joe Cardamone also told a story about doing gigs with Lanigan and doing a gig with Lanigan at some killer venue in Seattle that Lanigan didn't bother showing up for. So, I guess it's a long way of saying I don't know. I need one more question here, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about my stuff and then wrap it up. Do you think that Lanigan knew just how loved and almost revered he was by his fan base? I know that in previous interviews he had always noted that he had far more success in the UK and Europe than in the States, hence why he toured there so regularly. Did he ever give any indication that he knew why that was, or did he ever seem perturbed by that, or was he content with that? He had the appreciation of so many peers in the States. It always surprised me that his music didn't seem to resonate as much there generally. I feel like he and I had conversations disparaging Americans, basically saying that the average European is smarter than the average American. I don't know a nice way to say that. We're dumber. We are dumber. Also guns. I do feel that your average punter on the street in the UK has has more of an investment in education or culture or art or a more nuanced sense of humor. Y'all invested in education and the NHS, and we put it all into guns. So if you need us to blow shit up, we're here for you. But I do, there's a lot of artists, like PJ Harvey and other artists that are sort of alternative artists here, who are just artists in Europe. And yeah, I think he wished that he had a bigger audience here, but I've never spoken to an artist in my life who was like, yes, I have the perfect number of fans. They like me the perfect amount. I don't want any more. I don't want to play any bigger venues or, anything like that. I think we're all, we stay unfulfilled, and that's, how and why we keep producing. And sadly it's never enough. That said, I know that Mark knew that people loved him. I remember my friend Dave from Vancouver made me a votive candle, or she made two. She made one for me and one for Mark, and it was a picture of his face, sort of cut out and put on. I don't know if it was Jesus' face or something like that, and then with like a little bit of glitter around it. And and when I gave it to him, he just smiled, and he had a beautiful smile. And I think he really did cherish his fans, and he knew that he had found his people, that he found his tribe, that he was loved, and that, people really did love his music, his art, and I think in many ways he felt deeply understood. And I think as artists and human beings, that's really what we want. I feel like I should talk a little bit about my sort of journey with my grief over Lanigan. I want to say it's hard to believe that he's gone, but also it's hard to believe that he ever existed. It feels like some crazy fever dream that, you find an artist at that time when there's a hole in your life, and that artist fills that hole perfectly, and then you get to meet them, and then you get to hang out with them, and then you become friends, and then you fucking work together. And my friendship now with Roberto Bentavena, I met him through Mark, and our love for Mark and our sadness about losing Mark is one of the things that I think really paved the way for us to have the level of friendship that we have. I don't know Roberto particularly well. I haven't spent a tremendous amount of time with him, but when I texted with him this morning, I said, I love you, because I think grief in some ways is a gift, because it really splits you open, and it really makes you realize what's important and what's not important. And it's like a thunderclap that then just sort of silences all the background noise, all the other shit sort of falls away. And I think about I have a neighbor named Oscar. I love Oscar. Oscar's been a great friend. He's a Mexican contractor, and Oscar and I get into shit together a lot. We'll go and buy an old truck and fix it up and drive it and sell it, and sometimes make a couple of bucks. I had an old Datsun that Oscar had helped me with a little bit. My friend Sam too, and Mark was like, I love that truck, never sell that truck. And of course I sold it. That's what you do. But on the day that Lanigan died, Oscar and I were driving out to Mesa to pick up an old Airstream trailer that I was buying from some sort of Arizona lizard family. They'd sort of like raised their kids in this trailer, and I think they made knives and sold them at craft fairs and stuff. And I have this 1969 Ford F-250. It's just a beast, and drove it out there and hooked it up the trailer to the truck, and pulled it out of this gully, and then we're driving it back, and my friend Kyle Schutt from The Sword texted me first to tell me how sorry he was about Mark, and I think my phone just started like buzzing and like just going off like crazy while I was driving, pulling this trailer, and so I wasn't looking at my phone, and then Kyle's message was the first one that I saw. And then one of the tires went flat on the trailer, and so we had pulled over at a gas station right away. And And Ben Schaefer called. I picked up the phone, and Oscar's my friend, and also he's my neighbor. I didn't want to like cry in front of him, but I cried in front of him. What else can you do? And Ben and I both cried, and then I went in and I bought a yellow bandana so that I could fucking dry my eyes. And then I had a 2.5 hour drive home, and I had to just like keep it together and drive home, and got the trailer home on these like 20-year-old rotted tires, and I just came in the house and fell into bed and just cried and cried and cried for days. And I remember waking up in the middle of the night crying. And I'm struggling to put it into words. I think one of the first times that ketamine like came on the map for me was in the song Ketamine Blues, in the demo that Lanigan sent to me. And then when things when things sort of went bad in my life in November of 2020, I was flailing around trying to find a way through it, trying to find a way to get through it. And then a friend of mine suggested I try ketamine. And I think I'm realizing now that I've been off it for whatever 6 or 8 months completely, that I was totally fucking hooked. And whenever I take mushrooms, I always cry a little bit, like sort of look back on my life and cry about different things. And it's sort of like gentle tears or easy tears. There's not a lot of like trauma attached to it, just like emotion leaving my body. And ketamine was never like that for me. And there were only 2 times when I cried on ketamine, and one was thinking about Mark and listening to his music while I was high, and thinking about how alienated I was from him. Things got pretty bad between the two of us before the book came out. To the extent that, when Joe texted me the other day about a detail from the book, I cracked open the book to find it, and I realized that I've never read Sing Backwards and Weep in its published form. When that book published, things were sour enough between Mark and I that I couldn't bear to go back and read it. And then the other time that I cried on ketamine was after Mark died. I knew that I had gone off the fucking rails on it, and I was trying so hard to quit. And I had a little bit left in a bag, and so this is March of last year. And this is kind of gross, but I started doing ketamine August of 2021, and I had this black plate that I cut it up on, and I never washed the plate. I would just sort of put it away, but I always knew that it was there, and I used that plate again and again and again, just cutting lines up on it. And then after Mark died, I couldn't bear to listen to his music for a couple of weeks. And then finally, I had a bad night in March, and I came home, and I went out into the yard, and I put on Old Swan off of Gargoyle, and I scraped up the last of the ketamine into a couple of big lines and fucking railed them both, and then let the song play and just sat out in the yard and like cried into my mustache. And then I got up and came in the house, and I washed the plate. And, I think I ended up doing it twice more with friends, but that was it for me. And I don't know. I don't know how to put it all together. Feels like, I'm not going to say that Mark was my guardian angel or something like that, but I learned a lot from him, from his life, from his art, from my friendship with him. And, his absence is acutely felt for all of us. But also, I take him with me everywhere I go. And, a year later, I feel sadness and grief, and I marvel at the talent he was. And I just feel tremendous gratitude to have been alive at the same time as Mark fucking Lanigan.